Next up on Pax Americana. Mars sees waves of migration. While previously anticipated, all records have now been broken as Mars has seen millions of people immigrate within the last year. Many come from poorer states in Africa and South America looking for employment amid the unemployment crisis on Earth itself. Martian colonization companies promise guaranteed work in a variety of industries. The government's official stance of this is promoting such migration, believing it will improve the lives of the migrators and the current Martian colonists who arrived on Mars many years ago. Construction on the first North America class carrier started earlier this spring, with a ceremony opening the newly expanded shipyard built to construct the mammoth vessel. The government states the future vessels will be named after the continents of Earth, promising a carrier for all continents. It is unclear how the government expects to pay the reportedly exceedingly high costs to construct 5 of these such carriers. Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the next episode of Aurora for C Pax Americana, episode number 16. Hope you guys have been enjoying the series as we kind of look into the aftermath of the last great battles, and we go towards finishing out our ion drive technology ships, exploring and expanding outwards, and solving our crippling galaxite shortages, which are coming quicker and quicker towards us. So, in the last couple episodes, we began moving over people to Mars, and that's what we're doing here in the effort to turn Mars into a financial center. So we're building new financial centers and shipping them to Mars, while also growing Mars's population to approximately 50 million people. The reason for this is so that we can take advantage of additional bonuses, and because our racial wealth generation has been steadily declining due to the amount of expenditure we are performing. We are also continuing our construction of the new Red Sea class exploration vessels. We're planning for our Carpathian class cruisers, our North America class fleet carriers, and additional destroyers, frigates, and other vessels which will be needed in the future. As you can see, our galaxite shortages are a problem. At 4,400 tons remaining, we are in some dire straits. So I look for places to, well, solve that issue. I find that there are now civilian mining colonies being set up in other colonial locations, and that those can help. However, what I need to do is start large-scale extraction of high accessibility galaxite resources if we are to get through this. Because galaxite is used in anything from ship engines to missiles to maintenance supplies. It's a widely used and highly used resource, considering the fact that when we look at our fighters, when we look at our missiles, they all use highly power boosted engines, which increases the cost to galaxite. And when we need thousands and thousands and thousands of missiles to be able to maintain a defense against any incoming alien threat, our galaxite costs have tremendously increased. And so we are at a bypass where if we cannot solve this issue, we will be hamstrung along in terms of our production capacity. With that being said, we are also going ahead with our salvage operations. We are salvaging the wrecks in Laland, and that's going ahead well. We will be bringing back the salvager to Earth to unload all of the necessary components and get them sorted out. Our construction efforts in regards to our new surface assault weapons are also going well, and we are continuing our construction of new fighters with nearly 100 of each built. We will have a total of 72 F-120s and a total of 250 something Comets, and these will need to be replaced all of the existing F-8s, and we will be rolling those changes out over the course of the episode. We're in the process at the moment of retooling to the North American class carrier, but we are not there yet. And we'll be beginning construction on North American class probably in the late year 2000. As we are now in September 27th, 1999, we look to cross into the threshold of the new millennia in the year 2000. And what a difference it is from in the real world in the year 2000 comparatively to where we are today. And we are really expanding ourselves outward quite massively here. But we need to do a lot more. We need to extract a lot more resources if we are to maintain our high expenditure. As many people kind of commented, the number of carriers and ships we have is quite disproportionate to our economic status. We have a total of 10 carriers with a, well, we have a total of 7 carriers with a planned extra 360,000 ton carriers. So we're essentially doubling our carrier tonnage plans, and we're also building more frigates, more destroyers, more corvettes, more of everything, and it's a real toll on our production capacity and our mineral income. But it's necessary because, again, once we have our North America class carriers ready to go, my plan is to attack the aliens in Bernard Star, clear the area out, and extract the resources there. Due to its close proximity to Earth, it's not only a national security interest to secure the star, but it's also a economical interest. If we cannot secure Bernard Star, we are going to be an issue of not being able to defend ourselves on that axis, and we're not able to extract the resources that are located there. Those potential resources are close to Sol, which means close to Earth, and could be extracted for relatively cheap amounts in terms of transportation and fuel costs, compared to other options which we are continuing to expand further and further away from Earth. It also gives us another avenue of exploration which could open up more possibilities to Earth in general as we explore along that axis of advance. So that's kind of the plan. Once we have, 3 carriers, or 3 of the new North America class carriers, all of our new fighters, a decent stockpile of missiles, and enough destroyers and cruisers to protect those carriers, we're going to attack the aliens there. Keep in mind that they have a total of 60-ish ships with large ships across the board, and that we will need a high amount of ordnance to break through that defensive capability. We will also need to develop new types of missiles, and that's why we're making headway in terms of getting electronic warfare capabilities, because without those electronic warfare capabilities, we're going to be in a bit of a sore spot. You may have also noticed we begin colonization of Europa. The reason for that is high Galaxite reserves there that are close to Earth, so we want to colonize it. Unfortunately, Europa is a cold and distant world, which means that we are going to need to terraform it to be much warmer, to be more hospitable to humans. We've also begun moving over the new Amber 2 class fuel harvesters, which will be moved to Saturn. We're aiming to have over 50 million litres of fuel mined from Saturn every single year. This fuel is going to be vital. Because while it may seem we have very few reserves, if you go across and look at New Eden, Nelson, Terra Nova, Horatio, all of these colonies have nearly 100 million litres of fuel available, which gives us a reserve of around like 400-500 million litres of fuel. So we're actually in a pretty good way in that regard. What our issue is Earth itself getting enough fuel, because it's constantly building new ships. Those new ships require new fuel, require new maintenance supplies, and that puts a pretty cost on a lot of our efforts. Furthermore, we're transporting fuel from Earth to these distant colonies, and this is of course costly to do, so you have to keep that in mind. We also have colonies like Wallenstein Quarry and other areas, and one good thing is that with the advent of more resources getting to Earth, we actually have quite a decent supply of other resources that are not Galaxite. And so what I might be looking to do is start more heavier construction of things like automated mines, normal mines, and stuff like that. We currently have an untapped resource, which is the amount of normal mines we have on Earth, which we can't yet move to other places. However, if we can move these to another place, for example a Galaxite mining world like Europa, we could potentially extract thousands and thousands of tons of resources for already paid for mines, and that could be a serious benefit for us. Now, in terms of viability going forward of resources, we are in an okay state. We are fine in that regard, but we are always on the razor edge of not being able to expand our efforts as much as I would want to because of those Galaxite issues. And what I may need to look into doing is building less boosted ships, less boosted missiles, and other stuff like that to improve our fuel efficiencies and our Galaxite costs. We've already seen that happen with our freighters and with our colony ships and other kinds of vessels, where we've upgraded them to the new Block 2 version of those vessels, which feature the new ion drive catalyst engines or ion drive engines that produce far more range for far less fuel. And that is going to be a real benefit. For example, our freighters cut their fuel usage in pretty much half thanks to those new engines, and that's a major benefit when we're using half as much fuel as we previously were for all freighter trips. That's amazing. That's what we want to see, and that's a great thing for us. And that's why we're refitting all of these Aberdeen class vessels one by one. We're continuing those refits, and we'll continue them as much as possible to improve our fuel efficiency. We currently probably have about 20 Aberdeen class vessels in service. Those are our freighters. I'm looking to probably expand that up to 50 potentially. The more of them we have, the easier it'll be to transport refueling stations, mineral transportation, infrastructure movements, and all other sorts. Our colony ships, though, have been working well. With 50 million people now living on Mars, it's now an important part to get this financial centers moved to the area so that those populations can actually make use of that work. Mars, of course, is now a fully habitable planet, and that means that any amount of people can live on it up to its maximum population, which is something like 8 billion people, something like that. So we now have these Bavaria class colony ships, which have all those people, that million people that we can hold. And we also have these destroyers, which we are going to be moving in and out of training as we get them trained up. Those are the new Austria class destroyers which were built. We're scrapping the older destroyers and building them new. Every other we build new destroyers, so we can estimate that we'll have the number of destroyers we need probably by 2012. So it's going to be a decade-long building program for the new destroyers, and by that point, we're going to be thinking about the replacement for those destroyers. I've stipulated just by myself that each design, each class of ship is going to be 25 years in service minimum. So a Austria class destroyer that's built in 1999 will stay in service until at least 2024, at which point a replacement is either found or we will see about doing refits to the existing models with new sensors, new missile systems, new missile loadout, or other things that we may inevitably need. We're also moving terraformers and fuel harvesters around, fuel harvesters to Saturn, of course, and as well as terraformers to Europa to begin that terraforming process. So you can see here we're now mining 51 million liters of fuel for all of our Amber class stations, which are sitting in orbit of Saturn. So we have a lot of them. The new Amber 2s are a lot bigger though, and they can harvest a lot more fuel, about 5 million liters of fuel each. And so they're big contributors. We've moved to bigger stations because we need bigger resource collection rates, and fuel is something that we actually don't have an issue with. We just have an issue with extraction of it. We have plenty of it laying around with numerous gas giants in Earth, in Solar System, out of Solar System. We just need to actually harvest all of that fuel and then get that transported to the necessary areas. Earth is also growing quite tremendously. We are nearly at 3 billion people. From a population of 2 billion, we've grown approximately 800 million people within the span of about 20 years, which is a nearly 50% population increase within a relatively short period of time when you think about it. So continue our incrementing along. We are kind of just chilling for a bit. We're working on a lot of different projects at the moment, which is a lot of what happens. So there's also some intermittent slowdown you'll see where it doesn't do a full 5 days. This is likely those 3 non-player races doing, well, non-player race things. We can imagine that the enemy raiders are fighting them in some regard, and that's causing us issues. We also can see here that we've downloaded extra research points for future electronic warfare systems, which is something that's going to be a big takeaway from research. Another thing as well is we haven't yet recovered a cloaking device from one of the ships. However, we now understand that these ships can cloak and they can do that accordingly. We also found thermal reduction research benefits, and so we might consider the idea of our own cloak ships. However, it's far too high of a cost to pursue at this time, as it's likely a cloaked ship is going to be extremely expensive to build and extremely specialized, requiring new shipyard and new capabilities to be developed in both research and in mineral procurement. I took again moving over terraformers to Europa to begin that terraforming process because we're going to need to. Europa nearly 1 million people living on the planet, and we're going to hopefully get Europa up to a low enough colony cost where we can ship enough infrastructure in that we can colonize, or not colonize, but we can have a big enough population there that we can mine a lot of resources. Europa sits at about a minus 150, 140 degrees centigrade. That means it's unlikely that they'll be able to be terraformed, just purely on the atmospheric pressure. In terms of what humans can withstand, we can take about 4 atmospheres in Aurora of pressure. Of course, when your colony is very, very, very cold, you need a lot of greenhouse gas to, well, heat it to a point that humans can live on. The issue with this is that if you need more than 4 atmospheres of Artesium, you can't, and you can't get that Artesium hasn't gotten it down already to that point of habitability, you're basically stuck. I think Europa's on the edge of that. I'm not sure if it's possible, but if it is, it's going to require a lot of terraforming work, a lot of work indeed. And so what that led me to think about is potentially building bigger and better terraformers, increasing our terraforming rate and also building more of them to terraform Europa and some of these other outlying colonies that really need it to be able to really extract those resources. Because our biggest priority, I think, is using those mines we have on Earth as, and getting them transported at least somewhere to start their mining, because we don't have that right now, and that's the biggest negative on our mining situation. So we just finished up construction of 5 new Decatur class Corvette, so those are the new generation, and we're going to be scrapping a further 5 of the older Corvette as well in that process. Our Carpathian class vessel has finished the technological side of things, and so we're going to retool and we're going to start construction of the first one, which is the UTS Carpathian, which is our first cruiser. That'll be done on October 30th, 2001. We're going to plan to build around 6 to 8 of them, and their purpose, of course, is to be with our larger carriers and protect them with both their anti-missile systems as well as their large ordnance payloads, which will give them anti-ship capability large enough to supplement our carriers. You may have also remembered that previously I discussed the idea of, how we're going to break through jump points. And in that regard, I was, talking about battleships, battle cruisers, all these kinds of different vessels. And what I realized is to accomplish such capability is going to cost a lot, and then we're going to have to build up quite significantly. We're not going to be able to service a battleship until at least the 2010s, and such a ship is likely going to be using laser weapons and heavy armor as well as jump drive capability. So what areas do we need for that? We need larger laser focal sizes, we need better turret tracking speeds, we need a better armor capability, and finally we need jump drive efficiency so that we don't have the entire ship taken up by a single jump drive. Ideally, the purpose of these battleships will be squadron heads or specialized support vessels which will deploy with larger carrier groups to battled areas and provide jump point breakthrough. Probably sitting in between 25,000 to 30,000 tons, they will use 300mm lasers, something around there, so 12-inch guns. With heavy armor, we're talking upwards of 15 layers of armor composite, and the laser systems, which will mean that they have tracking speed that can track most targets, but they'll be sitting at a relatively low speed, probably fleet speed. The reason for this is that they're going to be jumping through jump points. They don't really need to care about catching the enemy, they just need to care about securing a beachhead. Because once we've secured the jump area, we can then bring in the carriers, and when the carriers have been brought in, they can then do the real damage to any enemy ships in the local zone. So that's kind of the thoughts I'm going for. The reason why it may not be until 2010, 2015 that we see developments of actual battleships is because we need to first build the shipyard, second, we need the new technology, and these two things take a lot of time, something that we don't really, we're not really able to bring down to a point where we could build, a battleship within the next 10 years. It's likely that, the first battleship may enter service in 2021 if we put efforts in now to making a viable ship that can be used. This, of course, is going to mean attacks into jump-pointed areas are going to be a lot deadlier, and our fleet is going to have to naturally be on a much more defensive footing until we can get ships capable of breaking through potential jump blockade. Because while it has not happened yet, both myself and obviously in RP-wise, the Admiralty has theorized if you just put your defenses behind these jump points like we have done, and the enemy ships jump through, they could be absolutely obliterated. You need some kind of capability to get through that, however you may do it. But building of the fleet continues, with new Austria-class vessels on the way and scrapping of older Canada-class vessels, and eventually construction of the Carpathian, as well as construction of the North America. We may need additional slipways for places like the Carpathian and other shipyards, but those are resources we don't yet have to spend. We have lots of corundum, we have lots of we have little gallicite, we have a decent amount of uranium, and we have a lot of neutronium. So we could look at expansion. However, right now let's just focus on getting that gallicite number up as much as we can. So yeah, those are the kind of thoughts in terms of shipbuilding. We may need to see pauses in building ships because of the costs. We need to be rethinking our doctrine, and also we have to bring back a lot of ships, scrap them. There's over 200 FAAs which we need to delete or scrap. Because there's no such thing as an auto scrap feature, what I'm likely going to do is just delete them all. This will make them disappear, but means we won't get any resources back. However, it will save me on the RSI inducement that deleting them will do. That scrapping them will do, that is. We're also refitting our Bavarias to the Bavaria 2s to increase their fuel efficiency, which means they'll actually be able to travel further distances, and of such bring colonies further and further out. Our colonization to new territories is kind of stopped because our exploration is also stopped. Our Red Sea class exploration ships are not yet finished, so they will be finishing relatively soon. And we are now in the year 2000. It's 23rd of July, year 2000. No millennium bug for us. And maintenance transports going about their bay. As you can see here, we are a 12,000 credit difference. A lot of that is because we're purchasing 16,000 wealth worth of minerals from our civilian industry. So the wealth situation is a problem. There are techs we can do to help with that, but right now our focus is on building more financial centers and moving them to Mars to increase financial output, to keep our economy afloat, because we built up a big reserve, about 100,000 wealth, and we're running through that rapidly from our massive construction efforts. Because building things, researching things, doing all these kind of things, that all costs wealth, that all costs resources to do. Even refitting, for example, as we just refitted the Maastricht and the Oakland as the two freighters there. As you can see, we only actually have some neutronium left on Earth, but we have a ton of mines sitting there. And we have a ton of most of the resources. Magnesium, uranium are kind of in an okay spot. Thorium and gallicite are in our worst situation. And I found that our governor isn't really the best here. Europa now hits 2 million people, and because Europa is quite small, we actually have quite good efficiency for terraforming on it. With 2 million people now living there, that's a pretty good start. We're going to need probably 50 million people or more. Ideally, we might have 50, 100 million people, however many it's going to take to mine that world. While Mars is also going to need to expand to fit more financial centers. And then you may be asking, okay, well, you're taking a lot of jobs away from Earth. And yes, we are. But in an ideal world, in a world where we have our mineral situation sorted out, what we want to have happen is Earth to be freed up so that we can expand slipways, build new shipyards, build lots of research facilities, so that Earth becomes a beacon of research and shipbuilding, and everything else has its own purpose. So we have financial studies done elsewhere. We have military academies potentially done in various different places. We have mining offshore to other places around the solar system. Keep in mind that if a person is not working, they are not taxed in Aurora, which means if they're not taxed, that's no wealth to the state. If our wealth goes negative, we then can't produce as much because our economy is going into default, and that creates a ton of potential issues. So what did just happen though is we finished our first 2 Red Sea class exploration class vessels, if I'm correct, and those are the Beta Hydri and the Chi Orionis. I don't know how I say that, but either way, we've got both those vessels. We're going to set them up with the new SIM-12As, which are the size 12 missiles, load that ordnance up, and then we're going to send them off on their missions. So what they're going to do is survey locations and areas we haven't previously done, but also go through new jump points to find potentially new systems. There's about an average hit or miss of 50% empty system, 50% full system, but we're going to just keep exploring outwards. I think I want to build around 10 of these vessels, so that's going to take, till probably 2007, something like that. But 10 of these vessels should be good enough for our planned purposes. 10 of them should be able to survey a significant amount of systems. I want to get to probably 50, 60, 70 systems. Keep in mind, the aliens threat is about 30 to 40 light years out. They could appear at any relative time. I've heard about some potential bugs, but I'm going to look at maybe sorting that if there is an issue there. But overall, we should be able to find the aliens. They're quite far away relative, so they can be quite built up. But it does take quite a bit of exploration, and we kind of stopped at around 40 systems discovered. So we need to increase that to maybe 100. And I'm also going to look at organizing ourselves the galactic map in a much better way. So I'll probably look at doing that off screen, of course, at some point. Okay, so what we're doing is we're moving off automated mines from our rich mineral asteroid and to an asteroid with more galacite on it. Because again, mining that galacite is really what matters. More galacite means more resources. We also just scrapped the 3 destroyers, 3 old Canada class, the Argentina, Canada, and Afghanistan. So the Canada, for example, was the first ever built in that line of ships. And she is over 22 years old at this point. So she's been scrapped after 25 years of service. The old destroyers have been in service for about 25 years, and now they're being replaced, slowly phased out. Of course, many will still serve for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years because they'll not be fully replaced yet. We don't have the capacity to replace them as quickly as we would want to. Our salvaging has also bared us fruits as we scrap some old components as well as disassemble some, so yeah, a bit of resources back and whatnot, but also find out some things. In terms of missile stockpile, we have 1,000 SSM-1Cs, we have hundreds of other kinds of missiles, but not really enough for a full-scale war. We have enough missiles for limited engagement capabilities, but we're going to need thousands of missiles if we were to fight, say, an NPR. And so resource collection rates really need to increase massively. Which is why we're making those efforts in Europa, it's why we're making efforts to colonize other areas, and it's why we're making efforts to move automated mines around to really expand our galacite mining. And why we need more freighters to move all of this stuff around. Our civilian sector has actually expanded quite a bit, which is a good thing. Though I haven't really used it as much recently, and I've turned off civilian contacts in the thing so you don't see them. As much as if you're wondering where the civilians are, that's why. I don't really move them. I don't really show them because there's just so many of them. They just move around very, very quickly. We're now our 141st Comet fighter, by the way. So there's another 100 or so to go. And once those are all done, we can then replace every single F8 with the F80, and the new F120s are currently sitting in that hangar on Earth because we are awaiting we are awaiting the new North America class carriers. Because without those carriers, we can't really do too much. You also notice I've stopped building missiles. That's because we don't have the Galasite to afford that. I'm spending all of our resources at the moment on building the F-80s, and that's a lot of Galasite being spent because of the highly boosted engines. Even though an F-80 is only 50 BB build, which is half the cost of an F-120, it's it's cheaper than the F-8As. It's still expensive. It's also something we have to deal with in that regard. But yeah, it's a thing of we're only prioritizing what we can build now. So if we have the fighters, then we'll build the missiles for the fighters. It's not a great place to be, but what are you going to do, right? But with our exploration further and further out of new systems and our Red Sea class vessels now getting into way, I'll see you guys in the next episode. And I hope you guys have enjoyed. I'll see you guys in episode number 17